Now in this demo, I'm going to use Microsoft Graph to create and issue a single request that contains multiple child requests. This batching of requests enables developers to submit multiple requests in a single round trip request to Microsoft Graph. This allows you to create a much more optimized query and a much more optimized application because you're really just submitting one round trip to Microsoft Graph rather than multiple child requests. So Microsoft Graph Explorer enables developers to create and test queries using the Microsoft Graph REST API. So in a previous demo, I used the Graph Explorer as an anonymous user and executed queries using the sample data collection. But in this demo, I want to show you how to use Microsoft Graph with a real user. So let's jump back to the browser, and I'm going to go to developer.microsoftgraph or developer.microsoft.com/graph/Graph Explorer. Now, I have this button over here on the left-hand side where I can sign in to Graph Explorer. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And I'm going to sign in as the current user, Megan. So I've gone ahead and I've just signed in as Megan. And we can see that her credentials or her ID is now showing up here. Now, after signing in, I'm going to select this little ... on the left, because I want to ensure that I have all the necessary permissions. So I'm going to select the permissions, and I want to verify that I have enough permissions to submit requests that I'm going to do throughout this demo. So I have to consent to a few permissions. So I'm going to go with mail.read. So we have consented to that one. I'm going to check calendars.read, and it looks like I've consented to that one as well. And then I'm also going to go to files.read write, and I have consented to that one. So if I hadn't consented, what I can do is I can then select it, and then I could select the consent button right there to go through the consent process. But I can see that I've already consented to all of these permissions. So all batch requests are submitted as HTTP posts to a specific endpoint, and that's going to the Microsoft Graph v1/$batch endpoint. So what I'm going to do is we're going to change this request that we're creating to be a post, and I'm going to submit this endpoint to, instead of going to the me endpoint, we're going to go to the $batch endpoint. Now, I'm going to specify in the body a couple request objects that I want to send over to Microsoft Graph. So this JSON code that I'm going to paste in here, let's give ourselves a little bit of room so you can read it, is going to have 3 separate requests. And the JSON code, what it's doing is each request is an individual HTTP request that I'm sending to Microsoft Graph. So it's going to request the current user's display name, job title, and user principal name in the first request. It's then going to request all the user's email messages that are marked with high importance. And it's only going to get specific fields back. And then the third thing it's going to do is it's going to request all of the current user's calendar events. So then let's scroll up here so we can see what the results are. I'm then going to run this query. And what you're going to see here is a series of responses. Notice the response includes 3 individual responses. So we have one response that we have right here for the first response. Then we have a second response. And then if I scroll down a little bit further, we have a third response in here as well. There we go. So here's our third response that you see right here. Now also notice for this third response, the data that was returned is indicated, also has this next link property. At the very end of the last request. What this is indicating is that there's more data, more pages of data that I can actually fetch. So this query matches the third request and the initial request that was submitted. And if you recall, that very first one, or that third one that we submitted was for a list of all my calendar events. So all this is really saying to me is that I have too many events to display in this result set. So it's skipping the first 10, and it's just going to jump to grab the top 10 that are coming back. So it automatically filtered to only show me the top 10 calendar events instead of showing me all of them because I didn't specify the number that I wanted back. Batch requests can also include both post and GET requests. So in this next demo, I'm going to submit a request that creates a new folder in the current user's OneDrive, and then request the newly created folder. In the first request, if the first request that I submit, if that fails, the second one should come back as empty. So the request that we're going to send is going to look like this. So you see we're submitting a post to the children endpoint for OneDrive. We're going to create a new folder here called test batching folder. And then after that, we're going to issue a request for that same one. So we're going to run this query. So I'll select run query. And notice the response has two objects in it. So the first object for the first response is an ID of 1, and it's got a status code of 201. That says that the folder was created. The second request also completed successfully. So let's go ahead and look at this where the ID is 2. There we go. So there's the ID is 2. We can see that it executed successfully from a status code of 200, and it returned the folder that matched the folder from the first request that I submitted. So in this demo, you saw how I used Microsoft Graph to demonstrate how to combine multiple requests using a single request. This capability of submitting batch requests using the batch query parameter enables you to optimize your application to minimize the number of requests that you submit to Microsoft Graph. Thank you for watching. I hope you've learned something. Now remember that this video is part of a series of videos on this Microsoft Learning module. This video is also part of a playlist that includes all the videos that are associated with this module so that you can watch them in order. The playlist and all its included videos are associated with a Microsoft Learning module that includes hands-on lab exercises and additional resources. Check the notes for this video and the associated playlist for more information and where to find the Microsoft Learning module.